we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody, to today's strategy session titled Helping Leaders Navigate Uncertainty in a Changing World. I'm pretty confident that you would agree with me that it's a changing world and that uncertainty is all around us. We're going to get to all of that here in just a few minutes. So, first of all, and most importantly, I'm glad you're here. And if and since you're here, I have some sense of the kind of role that you might be playing. If you're not hearing anything, Susan, I'm guessing it's on your end because I'm sure others can hear me. Yes. Someone give me a yes in the chat if you're hearing. Okay, cool. So I'm going to say, Susan, take a check on your speaker settings. We've all been there. So this is, I'm guessing at some level, you're one of these folks on this slide. And I'm hoping that you are, because if you are, you're exactly who I wrote this for. You're exactly who I created this for. And if you are in one of these kinds of roles, I'm confident that this next slide is true for you. That you know leading is harder now than it's ever been, and you're looking for ways to support leaders in this increasingly complex world. Like, you want to help other leaders get better. Now, you're hoping to get some stuff for yourself today, and I think you will. But my focus is really about how do we do this organizationally? How do we help other leaders get better at doing the things that will help them be successful? And when we do this, when we get this right, organizational results soar, and you're a star. Like, you you will be recognized for the value that you bring in a new way when you are able to help people through some of this complexity and navigate some of this uncertainty. So, for those of you that don't know me, I know that some of you do. I recognize the names, but if you don't know me, I'm Kevin Eikenberry, and I will be your uh, partner and leading this journey for the next 50 minutes or so. I've written a bunch of books. I've done a bunch of stuff. I've hosted a podcast. I've helped leaders from around the world. But the thing that is maybe the two most important things probably for you to know about me, if you don't know me, is number one, that I lead a team every day too. So I'm thinking about all this stuff for myself. And number two, I get the opportunity to look into a lot of different organizations and see what's working and see what's not, and see the stories that organizations are telling themselves and where some of those things are getting them stuck. And so it's because of that dual perspective that hopefully I have something to bring to you today that maybe you haven't quite heard, you haven't quite seen, and can help you see things in new ways. Because here's the thing, when we can see things in new ways, we can act in new ways. And if all we see is what we've always seen, we'll keep doing what we've always done. And in a changing world, not necessarily the best thing to do. So, a couple things people have said about me along the way. You can read those real quickly if you don't know me. I'm excited to join you, and let me tell you where we're headed. I'm gonna give you some ideas about why leaders need to lead differently now, and we're gonna talk about why flexibility is the best path in this uncertain and complex world. I'm going to give you a tool to understand the context of your situation, which is the basis for appropriate flexibility. And then, most importantly, how do we do something about all this? That's where we're going to spend our time today. So, if you or when you signed up, you saw those bullet points, but you slept since then. So, I thought I'd share those with you. This is where we're headed for our time today. So I have a question for you, and I actually, before I go too far, I'm going to put this on on the screen. And I just want you in the chat to tell me, for you, which of these is worse? Which of these is more of a challenge for you? And I'd just like you to do that real quick. Think about that for a second. And if you're willing to join Jenny, you can tell us what you think. And so we're about half and half so far. Uncertainty's taking the lead by just a little bit, but not by a lot. And I'm guessing that most of us would say, well, Kevin, I don't really love either one of these things all that much. and we're getting a sense of where everyone else is. Uncertainty, uncertainty, fear. Hello, Beth Nichols. Hello, Cheryl. Uncertainty, uncertainty. I really don't know. Like, I can't fear what I don't know. So uncertainty. So some of us in both camps. So research has been done on this fact, or on this question, I should say. And so I want you to imagine yourself uh, you're in college and you need a little money. And so you decide to join this research study. And you know you're going to get a small check for doing this. And so you show up for this study and they say, congratulations. By the way, this is a real study. I may be paraphrasing what they might have said, but congratulations. You're in this study and you're going to be in one of two groups. You're all going to get electric shocks. Now, some of you are going to get electric shocks that are all going to be strong, and some of you are going to get 20 electric shocks. Some of them will be moderate, and some of them will be strong. And you immediately think, well, why did I really need this check that badly? But then go ahead, and you're not going to be hurt in any way. So you take this, and group one receives 20 strong shocks, and group two receives 17 strong shocks with three moderate shocks randomly interspersed. Which of those groups do you think felt more stress, anxiety? Uh, Jenny, it wasn't even the 60s. Which of these do you think, group one or group two, would induce more stress, anxiety, worry, etc. for you? Okay, we've got one person saying the second. So one, 20 strong shocks, two, 17 strong shocks, three randomly moderate ones in between. I was stressed just hearing about getting shocked. Okay. Group two, group two, group two, group two. The ones I didn't know where they were coming because you don't know what's coming. Exactly right. Group three, meaning I walked out and didn't do the test. Now, here's the point. The second group was, they measured folks afterwards, you know, body responses, pulse rate, heart rate, all those sorts of things. And guess what? It was group two that had more anxiety, more issues, more stuff, which means, and they've done other studies, a lot of them actually using shock, electric shock, don't, which kind of shocks me. The fact is this, that the research continues to show that uncertainty for many people is actually worse than fear. And the reason I think this is important is that regardless of which you say is a bigger thing for you, is that we talk about how to deal with our fears. And we talk about how we help people in our organizations deal with fear. But we don't talk about how we deal with uncertainty. And yet it's constantly around us. So here's what I've learned. I've learned that people deal with uncertainty in one of fundamentally three ways. Um, Group one are people we'll call the ostrich. They try to ignore it and keep moving. Now, I know ostriches don't keep moving, but they like try to ignore it, put their heads in the sand. And so one group of people says, we'll just ignore the uncertainty, keep doing what we've already doing, keep moving, gonna do something, and we'll try to avoid the thought of the uncertainty. And the second group are what I call the statues. They become frozen, immobilized by it. The uncertainty stops them in their tracks and they can't move. They don't move. They won't move. And they wait. And the third group is what I would call the researcher, where we search for the right or best answer. And if we figure if we get enough information and we ask enough people and we do enough research and we ask AI enough of the right prompts, then maybe, just maybe, we'll get the right answer. We'll unpack the uncertainty, create certainty, and we can move past it. Now, most of us fall into one of these camps more of the times than not, although you probably recognize yourself in more than one, at least sometimes. The thing that I want to note for you is that third one, which is people searching for the right or best answer. And they're treating it as if we always treated school, which was there's a right answer, which is the path to the A, which is what I'm trying to do, is to be successful in school, which has taught us that there's a right answer. And so we take that into the workplace and we say, well, there's got to be a best answer. But the reality is that sometimes a good answer is enough. The person who's immobilized, the statue, is stuck in this tension and can't do anything. The ostrich is just plowing forward regardless. And the researcher is trying to figure this out and saying, I'm not going to do anything until I can get to the best answer, to the right answer. When the reality of this is that there's a tension between these two things. And sometimes by waiting, we're deciding. By waiting, we're doing things that aren't necessarily going to serve us, or might not serve us. But the waiting is not a strategy, it's just a response. So let's talk a little bit more about uncertainty in general. There are some facts about it that we need to talk about. Number one is we know that it is absolutely real and it's absolutely meaningful. If nothing else, the research about the electric shocks tells us that. And we all know this, that uncertainty can be hard without question. Like we know that, right? And when we're in uncertainty, it makes decision making harder. This isn't surprising, and everything I've said so far sort of leads us to that point. And yet we're asking leaders to make decisions, and if their situation is more uncertain, then decision making gets harder, in part, but not only, because it increases anxiety, stress, and fatigue, which again we've also already talked about. Right? The other thing is that it can create other mental health challenges beyond those things, including eroding our confidence and many other things. But it's not just what it does to us, it can be what it does to those around us, our relationships, our teammates, those that we lead. All of those things can be true. And it's important to remember that while there's been more talk about uncertainty in the workplace in the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years than in my entire professional life, things have always been uncertain. Uncertainty is all around us. You know, the old joke is the only things to be certain about are death and taxes, and there are more things that we can be certain about, but it's a pretty small list. It's all around us. And so it's useful for us to think about, but I think it's because the level and the things upon which we are uncertain have grown bigger, that this has become a topic of conversation and concern, which leads me to the last point I want to make about uncertainty is that the outcome won't necessarily be bad. And yet, when we, like with the shock, the next shock might actually be not as bad, right? But so often, certainly societally, but so often even individually, when we hear uncertainty, we immediately go to uh-oh, as opposed to I wonder. And so it's really important for us, if this is the situation that we're in, which we are, that our leaders are in, which they are, so then the question becomes, how do we help navigate it? And I believe the way we navigate it is with flexibility. The way to address uncertainty is the use of flexibility. Now, let me just stop here for a second because some of you are saying, well, wait a minute, Kevin, don't we want our leaders to be consistent? Don't we want our leaders to be the people we can look to because we know that what they're doing is we can have confidence in and we can follow them? Don't we want that? And isn't that what I want for myself? And I would say there's an awful lot of good things about consistency. But I'd like you to imagine for a second, and some of you may have heard me use this analogy before, but I'd like you to imagine, I can look out, I don't have to imagine, I can look out the window and see one. I want you to imagine a full-size mature tree. Either by looking at it now or by imagining it in your mind's eye. And what would you say about that tree? It's solid, it's strong, it's consistent, it's not moving. It's like rooted in the ground. It's been there a long time. It's not going anywhere. That's what I want from my leader. I want that consistency. And yet, if there's any breeze at all, that same tree that we say is solid and stable and rooted and consistent is absolutely flexible. And in fact, if it couldn't flex in the breeze, especially in a strong breeze, it wouldn't survive. So the thing is that that tree is both consistent and flexible. And I believe that's the model for what we want from our leaders and what we need from ourselves is to be consistent and flexible, which means we need to know what to be consistent and stable on and what to be flexible about. Um, in the tree's case, the tree is rooted in the ground, which creates that stability and that consistency. And what are we rooted in as leaders? Well, we're rooted in our values, in our principles, in the organizational strategies that we're working towards. Like those are the things that we're rooted in and consistent about. And we have to be flexible too. What I'm describing and what the tree shows us every time we look at one is that the world of we're talking about here is not an either or world, it's a both and world. That it's not consistent or flexible, it's consistent and flexible. And I would propose to you that this is a picture that is critical to our ability to navigate uncertainty with greater success and confidence. And so we could call it both and leadership. What I often say is that the test of an effective leader is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in mind and apply each when needed. We just talked about it, best and good. And we just talked about it, consistent and flexible. There's a tension between them, and yet both have value. Both, while opposed to each other, can be valuable to us. And so our job is to see them both, see the tension, and move into the tension appropriately based on our situation. So both and leadership, as this slide says, is what I would call flexible leadership. And so here's a question that every time I ask this of myself, I'm convicted. So I'm going to hope it's a question worth your pondering as well. And that is, if in a changing world, which we are in, right? If the world is changing and we're not, like here we are, and the world is changing around us, what are the odds that the changes that the world is making us better? Like if the world is changing and we're not, chances are the odds of our success are not going up, right? So we need to be thinking about how do we intelligently and intentionally change, adjust, tweak, flex. Okay? So that's the context in which we're living here that we need that I think we're all living in. We need to think about a little bit. So before I go on, this is kind of a natural break. Any questions for me so far? You can go ahead and put them in the chat, and you can do that throughout. You did a great job when I was telling you to put stuff in the chat, but you don't have to stop. Anything that you've got, any question that you have, any insight you want to share before we continue. Anybody? Anything? Question you want to ask? Okay. Well, if you're still typing, please continue. Don't stop just because I'm going to go to the next slide. And again, you don't have to wait to the end. There will be the obligatory slide at the end, the question slide, before we finish. But you don't have to wait. And I hope you won't. And I'm watching, so I'll try to answer questions as we go. I'll try to slide them into the conversation in a way that makes the most sense. Okay. So I want you to imagine I plopped you out in a place that looked a little bit like this. You have no idea where you are. None, right? You're in the wilderness of some sort. This is not a reality television show. There are no cameras around, but you also, if you have your phone, there's no cell signal, right? So that's where you're at. So in the chat, tell me, right? And I were to tell you that I know you can't see where you're at or where you're going, but there is a way out of here. It's not going to take you days. You can get out of here. And I'll give you one thing to help you get out. What's the one thing that you want? And in the chat, tell me what you want. Anybody? If this is the situation I've placed you in, Sherry says a compass, a map. A map to get out, right? A trail, a map, a path, a map. You see where you're all headed in the same general direction, and maybe a bottle of Chianti. Of course you would, Marlene. An energy drink. Well, that energy is awesome until we run out of it, and the map or bug spray. Amy, you don't know that there are bugs in that particular place, but I hear what you're saying. Okay. I think at some level, we all want a map. It's like when you go to the mall and you see the big map and it says the dot says you are here. Like what we really want here is a map that says, here's where I'm at. Now what do I do? Just like we're in the mall and some of us probably haven't been to a mall in a long time, but that's what popped into my head. But you've been places, right? There's a map and it says, here's where you are. And maybe if this you're looking for that trail and you're hoping on that trail, it says, aha, here's where you are. Here's the way out. Like we need that. Because if and when we have that, we have a lot more confidence that we can get out successfully. Once we know where we're at and the context of our situation, we can move far more effectively and far more confidently. And in a world of work today that isn't all the same because of this uncertainty, what we really need is a map. And so, what I want to share with you is that I want to be able to use the map, read it correctly. Well, Sandra, I do have a bit of a belief that our phones have made many people poorer map readers, and yet, hopefully, you'll follow with can it be a talking map? That's called that's called your phone, I suppose. Um, but I hope this metaphor is still useful to us, even if we have a hard time reading maps. And you know what? The map I'm about to show you, at first, you might have a hard time reading. Some of you may have seen this. I'm sharing with you some ideas from my book, Flexible Leadership, that came out last year, that I believe is the book for our times because it is all about how do we deal with the uncertainty. Because we used to lead in a world that was far more certain. There were fewer unknowns. So let me show you this map that's called the Cynefin framework. And that word doesn't look like it would sound like Cynefin, but trust me, it does. And if you're trying to remember how to say it, just say it kind of rhymes with Kevin. It's the Cynefin framework. It's not my framework, but it's a powerful map that I want to share with you and how we can use it to be more effective as leaders and how we can help others, how we can give this map to other leaders to help them be more effective too. So let me walk you through these four contexts, these four parts of the map, these four directions, if you want to think about it that way. And we'll start at the bottom right with the clear context. This is the context we all like to lead in. This is the context that many of us were brought up in. This is the context that most of our leaders presume they're operating in. The knowns are known, the patterns are familiar, everybody knows what they are. Pretty much people know what the cause and effects are to what's going on in our situation. The process, there are facts, they're indisputable, we know what they are. And so because of all that clarity, there are agreed upon solutions. Like there's a best practice. We just follow the best practice and things will go great. But what I just described to you is not the world we live in most of the time anymore. Once was. less so. Sometimes we're in that context, but I would propose to you that more often we're in one of the other three. Let's go up to the top on the right where it says it's the complicated context. The complicated context is, well, there are knowns and there are unknowns, and we can probably label the things we don't know. And maybe we can make some forecasts or some guesses, but we don't really know for sure, probably can't know for sure, but we can guess. And maybe we can bring in some experts, or maybe we have some experts on our team. So rather than me having to have, or feeling like I'm supposed to have all the answers, if I can't have all the answers as the leader, I can find the people around me that have it. And then perhaps we can do some situational analysis and then we can move forward. It's still not all known, but man, it's better than nothing, and but it's still not clear. It's complicated. And then there's what's called the complex context, where there are clearly things we don't know and we know we don't know them. We don't even know the things we don't know. Like there are competing ideas. There are opinions that seem to be drastically different from each other, and they all may seem to have merit, but nobody really knows which way we should go. Things are unstable, things are unpredictable. We probably ought to try something. We don't even know what to try. But the key word here is to try something, which means not to be the ostrich, which means not to be the statue, and which means not to be the researcher. But this fourth thing that says we're going to test. We're going to be the scientist. We're going to try stuff. We're not going to necessarily know if it's going to work, but we're going to try some stuff to see. And when we step out and do that, we might learn something that might help us. When I describe that, or when you read that part of the slide, I'm betting that you're saying, "Hey, man, that's Kevin. That's where my work is a lot of the time." And see, the thing is, if we try to lead from a clear context when the world is actually complex, we got problems. And if we try to treat things as if they're clear and they're actually complicated or complex, well, that's why we end up stopping, ignoring, freezing, right? Rather than thinking about what we could actually do that might teach us something. We might learn something, we might be able to keep moving rather than being stuck. Now, the fourth context, the only clear thing is I will turn on my laptop. Well, there you go, right? And in my in my case, I hope that when I turn it on, it will actually come on. That's a whole nother conversation, Sandra. I currently have a little bit of uncertainty even about that, which definitely causes me some mental anguish. So let's talk about the fourth context, which is chaos, or the chaotic one. And I waited to come to this one because a lot of people, that's what people say, well, things around me are just chaotic. And in the use of this map, of this framework, far most of the things that we call chaotic are actually either complex or complicated. Dave Snowden, the man who created and has been working on and further developing and categorizing this framework for many years, says there are very few things that are truly chaos. There are times, there are moments. I'm going to Texas today. I'm going to be at a plant that I've spent a lot of time at. Haven't been there many years, but I've been there a lot in the past. It's down on the Gulf Coast near Houston. And when I think about truly chaotic situations, I often think about this particular plant because I was there about a week before a hurricane once. And when a hurricane's coming into the Gulf Coast or to wherever it might be going, here's what we know. There's a hurricane. We do not know where it's going to land, when it's going to land, and where it lands and when it lands will have a huge impact on anything around it. And a small change in that could have a huge impact. Like there are things that are unknown. There's turbulence. Like there is no pattern. Like we just know things are gonna not be good, most likely. And what we really need is, even though we don't know, we need someone to step up and decide something. We need someone to take action. And see, this is where this has something in common with clarity. Because in a clear context, we have leaders that are taking action because they know. But in a chaotic situation, we need a leader to step up even though they don't know. But if you act in that regard, either one of the things on the bottom half, when the situation is really in the top half, it's like I'm in that jungle and I'm going to bring out my water skis because I like water skis. Like it's just not going to work. And it's going to cause other problems, right? So I'm curious. Now that I've described each of these to you in a at a high level, if I ask you to say which of these do you see most of your work in or a lot of your work in today, which one would you say? Put that in the chat. And your answers are useful, but your answers also help others too. And I'll let you type them in. Yep, and I'm getting the answers that I expected. And I'm getting the answers that I see most of the time, which is they're in the top half, right? This is what's underneath all of the discussion over the last 15 or 20 years about, well, we can't lead like by command and control anymore. We can't just have leaders who are direct. And the real reason is not because that's bad, but because that style and that approach is useful if things are truly chaotic and is useful if things are crystal clear, but it's not when things are complicated and chaotic. Excuse me, complicated and complex. So this context map is actually what's under so much of the discussion about what we really want and need from our leaders. To have our leaders be willing to be participatory, to have our leaders be willing to be vulnerable, to have our leaders be willing to be open, for our leaders to be willing to say, I don't know. All of those things are required in the top half, not so much in the bottom half. Now, there's one other thing about this that I want to share with you that I think is also useful, and that is if you think about the right hand side, you see at the top it says that's what are called ordered systems, and the left side are what are called unordered systems. Let me describe what I mean by that in the simplest way that I can. Since Sandra, I think it was Sandra, brought up her laptop, I'll use that as the example. There are some people in this world that could take a laptop and take it all apart and put it all back together. And when they put it back together, it would work. Now, I can't do that. But like there are parts and but the system is ordered. There are places the pieces go, and if you put the pieces back together in the right order, in the right way, or if it's complicated and you get help from people, but like there's a way to get it put back together. Like it's not Humpty Dumpty. Like we can put it all back together. It's going to work again. Laptop, ordered system. Mayonnaise. Like you may know what the items are that make up mayonnaise. There's not very many, but when you put those items together and mix them up, you're not taking them back apart again. Unordered, right? Lots and lots of our systems are unordered systems where we can't pull it back apart. That's one of the reasons why it's so complex or chaotic. So now you've got a map. We were talking about the idea of wanting a map to get out of the wilderness, and I'm suggesting that this is the map to help us get out of our situations that we're leading in. The only thing I can put back together is a pen. All right. Ordered system, right? Okay. So I believe that once we understand context, we get a lot smarter. And what this whole discussion was about was helping us see the situation we're in more clearly. Because once we see that, we're like, well, yeah, we need to do something differently here. I don't have all the answers. I need to ask some other people. We don't have all the answers. We got to try something. Like we've got to be willing to make those adjustments because if we don't, we get unintended consequences. And once we have the map, once we understand the context, we get a lot smarter, right? The way I often think about this is with the simple phrase that you say all the time. All of us do. Someone asks you something. Sometimes people ask you something and you answer them. Sometimes people ask you something and you say, well, it depends. Well, what does it depend on? It depends on the context. And so once you say, well, it depends on this and this and this, and if I know those things, then I can decide or I can have more confidence or I can move forward. That's where we want to try to get. That's where we're going to have to help other people get. So I got to talk to you about this idea of the three things, the two things I've now talked about, and the third one I haven't. What we call the flexible leadership approach is intention. I realize that I might need to do it differently. I realize that there's a tension in the world and I might have to adjust and I need to adjust, but I need to know what the situation is, what's the context of it, and then we need to understand flexors. I've actually already shown you a flexor and talked about them without telling you what they are. What they are symbiotic items in tension with each other that are naturally occurring. So think about this. Some leaders lean toward compliance. Some leaders lean toward commitment, right? And you could argue that, well, I want people's commitment. Awesome. But are there times when compliance is all you need? Yes. If things are chaotic, we don't need to have build consensus. We need someone to say, we're going this direction. And trust me, we don't even need everyone's decision to decide where 20 of us are going to go to lunch. We just need someone to say, how about this? Let's go. So, like, sometimes compliance is great. We know that we can over-index on compliance. Sometimes commitment is great, and we can also over-index on it. The idea of a flexor is what's my situation, and what does my situation call for in terms of which end of this do I want to move to? Because the big idea with all flexors is that at the far ends of the flexor, there are unintended consequences of living there. Some situations lead us to move closer to one direction or the other. And our natural tendency might have us at one end or someplace along this tension. It's not about what we like or what we're used to. It's about what serves the situation. And that's flexibility. How do we adjust and tweak given that both of these things could be true? Best and good, compliance and commitment, talking and listening. Lots of change in the status quo. I could go on and on. The book has 18 of them. But when you start to look at the world and see this way, you see them everywhere. And you start to say, wow, yes, so Keith says compliance may be needed for regulations. Yeah, if those regulations are in clear context, right? And mostly they are. We need people to wear their PPE. Like compliance is enough there. We may not need people to love their PPE, but we need them to wear it. But there's lots of things where if someone came to you on your team and said, "Well, whatever you say, boss," and you're like, "That's not really what I want." That's compliance, but that's not really what I want. I want that for the PPE, but for other stuff, I might want something entirely different than that, and need something entirely different than that. So even if I'm comfortable with trying to get them to just sort of do what I'm saying toward the compliance side, we've all seen that not work in some contexts, right? All right. So I, I want to step back and have you see the big picture of what I've been doing for the last 40 minutes. I've really spent almost all of our time on mindset. I've said, how do we see the world? How do we look at the world? What do we believe about the world? Because if we don't get that part matched up with whatever the skill sets are, nothing's going to happen. Like, I believe that the biggest challenge for our leaders is rarely the skills. First of all, we can teach them the skills. We got more ways to teach them skills than we've ever had. But if the mindset doesn't match that skill set, it's not going to matter. Like, someone could intellectually be following what I've said for the last 40 minutes, but if they fundamentally don't agree with the idea that flexibility matters, it doesn't matter because they're not going to apply any of the stuff we've talked about because it's not an academic or intellectual exercise. It's ultimately not even about mindset or skill set, it's about habit set. But if you don't have the first two, you can't get the new habit set, right? Like, so much of what happens in the world of training is we're going to teach them skills and then we want them to go do it. What I'm suggesting is if the mindset doesn't match, you got no chance to get to do it. So here's how I and how we like to think about this, right? Mindset is we may need to see things differently. Skill set is we may need to do things differently. And habit set is doing that with some regularity, recognizing when I should do that based on how the other two are connected. Mindset, skill set, habit set. Right? So let's be clear. The world is a complex and uncertain place. And because of that, leadership is a complex and uncertain place. Leading is a complex and uncertain set of expectations, behaviors, right? And I'll go back to where I started. You came here to say, how do I help leaders navigate uncertainty? Well, the first thing we have to do is to recognize that there is uncertainty, right? So mindset equals regulating emotions. That's part of it, right? For sure. Sanders says, I was just thinking about uh, individual contributors' perspective. People are struggling with the level of change and uncertainty. They don't always have the desire to follow along. Most definitely complex leading now. And it's not just the individual contributors that are struggling with that, because the leaders are too, right? Like, we as humans, as leaders, are struggling with that. So, of course, our team members are, because they're looking to us in some ways to help them, right? And so anything that we can do to help people see this picture differently and yes, at some level regulate emotions, but at least understand our emotions. And here's the thing, when we start to see the world differently, we can then act differently. Until we can see that different picture, we don't have those options in front of us, right? So, um, addressing all of this requires flexibility, as I said. Okay. So a lot of great stuff coming in on the chat. And so what I want to do now is just say, I told you I had the obligatory slide here, right? So questions, other comments, maybe something that hit for you or something I said that you want me to say more about, or just something you're unclear about, anything at all before we move on. Anything? Okay. Some people don't understand when or how to flex, what requires them to remain in compliance and when they can adjust. And that's right. And so hopefully what I've given you today is some handles to help them, to help you talk about that in new ways, right? Um, and that's exactly uh, why I put this strategy session together for you. It's like people they don't know the when to flex relates to the context of the situation. What does the situation Tell me. And the Cynefin framework might help us think that through, right? Uh, Becca asks, how would you recommend encouraging leaders to shift from being frozen or ignoring a change to becoming a researcher? I actually hope they don't just become a researcher, but they may become a scientist, where we're going to try hypotheses rather than just look for the perfect answer. But I think the first thing is when you give people that picture, like we can't ever see something until we see it, till we have a way to categorize it. So Becca, the short answer to your question would be uh, talk about the natural responses that we might have when things are uncertain, and rather than judging that, ask people like how which of those is you most of the time? When does it serve you and when doesn't it serve you? Right? How is that helping you or not? Right? So I want to help them discover and see it for themselves as much as I can because discovery learning is the most powerful. And so by giving them some labels to put on it, like you just repeated here, is the best way to help. The reason that the reason people are doing it the way they're doing it is either they're not aware that there's another way or they can't label the other ways. Right? So bringing that Becca, bringing that to a conversation and asking that and allowing people to talk about it is probably the way I would suggest that you do it. What are good ways to show leaders the WIFM for mindset? Well, the thing I would start with is um, sometimes before we can see it in ourselves, we need to see it in others. So if we think about a member of have them think about a member of their team where they don't get their behavior. Like they don't understand why they do the things that they do. It doesn't make any sense to you as to why the other person does those things. And yet those things make sense to that person or they wouldn't be doing them, right? What's different? What's different is a belief or a mindset that you hold versus they hold. And so uh, the best way to start there is to help them see that mindset isn't just a thing that people talk about in training workshops, but it's how we see the world, and how we see the world impacts how we act in the world. And so if we're continuing to get the same results as we do the same things, which is what will happen, then we have to start to see how do I see the world differently, right? Like, let's do this. How many of you, and I'm going to guess it's most of you. How many of you remember when you moved from being an individual contributor to being a leader? And how you started to see the world differently once you were in the new role? Anybody, just give me a yes in the chat if that resonates for you. That's a mindset shift. That's a perspective shift, right? And so, um, if we want to help people see mindsets, number one, we have to talk about them. And number two, we need to help. The WIFM for that is to say that until we see it differently, we can't act differently. And if the behaviors that we have today aren't working, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're a bad leader. It means you have a blind spot. It means you have a blind spot. Okay. All right. So how do we get there, right? All of you are here thinking like, okay, how do I get there, Kevin? How do I move forward? Here's the first thing. Like I've built something for you that I think you're going to love. It's completely free, and it doesn't require you spending more time with Kevin. It's a action guide, and just send an email to info@kevineikenberry.com and we'll send you this action guide. Here's what this is. It's a summary of this session, but it's more than that. It's some next steps that you can take as an organization, but it's even more than that because some of you are saying, man, I need other people in our organization. I wish they'd have been here. I wish they'd have heard what Kevin was talking about. This action guide is exactly what you could share with them to have the conversation continue in your organization that we've just been having here. That's why I built it. And yes, Marlene said you can, if you already know who your person is in our team, you can send a note to them. If you don't know, send it to info@kevineikenberry.com. Either way, and we'll get this action guide to you. I can tell you, I built it for you, but I built it for you to help you share it in your organization, to help you share these ideas, create a conversation in your organization, completely free, right? Um, Shifting mindset from natural instinct to focusing on stakeholders anxieties, like that's a different mindset. Like I have to see how important that is or I'm never going to do that. That's a great example. Excuse me, great example. So there are three next steps, and the first one, three other, right? This is your first next step, and here are your three more next steps. And the first one is, I mentioned this book, and so a lot of the stuff we talked about today is in this book. So you might want to think about getting copies of this book in your organization. You can go to that link. You can order them on Amazon. You do whatever you want to get them, and use this as your summer book read for your leaders and have them talk about what they learn here. Talked about all the flexors, goes into a lot more depth, obviously, than we went into today. But it's just like we did. It starts with mindset first and spends more time there than we did. And just like we talked about a little hinted at here today, ultimately it's got to be about habit set, and we talked about that as well. So that's one option. Another option is, we have a workshop that's built around the stuff we've just talked about. Thank you, Amy. We have a workshop built around this. And so you can go to kevineikenberry.com/FL workshop and learn more about that. Talk to us if you want about how we could bring that into your organization to help you think about this, customize it, tailor it for your needs. That certainly is an option, right? So you can go get some books. So first of all, you get the tool, the action guide to help extend a conversation about these ideas in your organization. And then if you want more help from us, you can get books, you can do the workshop, or you can wait with bated breath for what's coming in July. And what's coming in late July or early August is a mindset, skill set, habit set tool that is going to transform how your leaders can be more confident, make better decisions, communicate more effectively, use the frameworks that we talked about today, and much more. Whether their context is working together, working at distance, doing some of both, like all of that. Um, I'm not going to say any more about it except to say that in late July, because you were here, you're going to get the chance to learn more about it. And you can tell us if you really want to know more about it now. Like if you really want to know about it, you want to kind of go to the front of the line, then just send a note to our team or to info@kevineikenberry.com, and we'll make sure that you're at the front of the line for that conversation. I can tell you it's one of the most impactful things that we've ever done, maybe the most impactful thing that we've ever done. And I'm super excited to share it with you when we're ready to share it. Okay. So given all of that, let's go back to where we started. The world is uncertain, right? We know that's true. Maybe more uncertain with higher stakes than ever before. And because of all that, we've got to navigate it better. It's more important that we navigate it than ever. And to do it means we have to be willing to flex. We have to be able to see that what's the map telling me? What's the context that I'm in? And how do I move from that place? And so if you want to help your leaders navigate uncertainty in a changing world, you have to help them see the value of flexing, give them the capability to flex, and then support them in flexing moving forward. And when you do those three things, good things will happen for them, for the organization, and for you. So with that, I'm finished. It's been a pleasure to be with all of you today. I appreciate your content, your context, your conversation, your questions, and all that in the chat, and the energy that I could sense from that. And I wish you the very best. And I look forward to talking to all of you soon. And I look forward to sharing this new tool with many of you in just a few weeks. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.